Oh, beautiful. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Rob St. Clair, and I have a very special guest.
Hello, everyone. I'm Neiad Ammary. I'm the Vice President of the NCVF.
Dr. Neiad Ammary, the Vice President of the NCVF, the Commissioner of the ECVA, right?
You got it.
I'm going to move this microphone a little closer for you.
There we go.
Oh, yeah, you sound beautiful.
All right.
Neiad, I'm excited to have you because, well, for lots of reasons. So I'm sure we have lots of stories to tell between the two of us of just a lot of years of college club volleyball. But you're an interesting guy whose brain I want to pick about this tournament because you are one of kind of the leaders responsible for seeding the men's Division I tournament.
Correct.
And that is probably a very interesting process. To sort of synthesize all of what's going on from everywhere in the country. A lot of teams who don't necessarily play against each other. So talk me kind of through a couple of the steps that it takes to go from this entire registration of this tournament through seeds 1 through 48.
Sure. So as you know, this tournament is the culmination of season-long competition. So, NCVF teams compete really all year long, but the regular season begins January 1st. And so, we consider how teams do at this tournament, plus any preseason data we can get on them. And when we come out with our first polls, usually in mid-February, we publish polls every 2 weeks, and all of that leads up to this tournament. So there's a lot of shifting throughout the season as we learn more about who these teams are. And, as you know, with collegiate club, teams are often up and down throughout the season.
Oh, yeah.
Some teams, look strong early and then they kind of fade away. Some teams just kind of show up on the radar. A week before this tournament, they win a league or something, and then here they are and they're running the table. So it was a lot of data that we have to collect and analyze, and somewhat like reading the tea leaves, it's you're trying to make sense of very convoluted and complicated information and trying to find out what's what. So this year in particular was especially challenging. We have 48 teams in men's Division I, but we had a surplus of teams trying to get in. There are years.
That's what I was wondering about.
Yeah, there are years where we kind of know who the top 40 are, and then the bottom 8, they might be more like 1AA teams, and we throw them up in D1A and they become like the sacrificial lambs.
But, I know of a couple of those teams in NCVF history, sure.
Yeah, but I think this year, in particular, the 4 seeds in all these pools are particularly strong. So, the competition is going to be very even. There's going to be a lot of parity. Don't be surprised if you see some upsets. So, we don't expect all the seeds to hold in the order that we put them in. We'll be thrilled if that happens. If we get any of the pools right, 1, 2, 3, 4, that means we're doing something right.
I was going to ask about that. Is it like a measure of your success of how many pools finish with chalk order, 1, 2, 3, 4?
It is. Also this year we've been developing an RPI system that we had never had.
Wow! Look at us leveling up in the NCVF.
Yes, so it's similar to the RPI that you'd find everywhere else in the collegiate club volleyball. Your winning percentage, your opponent's winning percentage, and your opponent's winning percentage are all components of it. And so we've been looking at that data every time we come up with our polls, and we definitely took it more into consideration as we were deciding which teams deserve to get into men's D1 and ordering the teams in terms of, who's a 1 seed and then what order should the 1 seeds go in, who's a 2 seed and then what order should the 2 seeds go in. That's part of it. And then the other part of it that always kind of throws a wrench in things is that when we see the tournament, we've got a rank order in mind based on the empirical data. But then, if we did it purely by that, we would have matchups between teams who are in the same league or matchups between teams who have already played each other throughout the year. So one thing we always try to do for all these teams is make sure that they're in a pool on day 1 with teams that they've never played this year. And so
it's
awesome. A true test of just pure competition.
Yeah, it also helps get some very interesting cross-league and cross-country data about who's playing who, and that's I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to ask about that with all the data that I'm sure you take in from different results from around the country and from just different people who see these teams play and work for different leagues across the country. How much do you influence, or how much do you take in and value the eye test? Just of like some people who work in different leagues, like how do you compare, like we're looking right here in front of us at Notre Dame versus West Virginia, for example. They're not tremendously far apart from each other, but I'm sure they haven't played this year, and I doubt they have very many common opponents. So is there any consideration just to like people who see Notre Dame play in the MIVA and people who see West Virginia play, and where are they? Are they ECVA?
Yeah, they're in my league.
Okay, so just like guys and girls and people who work in these leagues that just see these teams play and can just tell you about like what their strengths are, what sort of style they play. Does that have any influence about how you guys see the tournament?
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said it didn't. We take strides toward objectivity a little bit more each year, but inevitably there's conversation that involves subjective judgments, and at this point the people who are involved on our ranking committees are people who have trustworthy eyes and trustworthy voices, but all of us are prone to error, again, especially when you're dealing with college club volleyball. And we've got
just
teams
high variance by its nature.
Yeah, I mean, one day your eyes are telling you one thing and you see the same team a few weeks later and they're completely different.
I kind of love the little piece of subjectivity as part of this, just to help synthesize everything that's going on in the country, because like you said, trusted eyes that know college club volleyball, that know what it takes to what makes a good team, what makes a 1 seed, what makes a 3 seed, whatever this level. Yeah. I think I kind of appreciate the art form in that.
Yeah, it is definitely an art, a little bit of an art and a science. So
sure.
It's a blend of the two.
So what are a couple things in your opinion, just like on-court abilities or play style things, or even things that might show up in data, what makes a 1 seed to you? If you had to describe what makes a typical 1 seed, there are 12 of them in men's Division I.
Yep.
What are characteristics of a team that's typically going to get seeded that high?
Well, first of all, they have to have the record to back it up.
Yep.
Right. We definitely give a little bit of recognition and deference to league champs. So you win your league, especially if it's a major league, if it's MIVA, if it's Southern California, Northern California, that says something. If you're the best in your region, you're a candidate for a 1 seed.
For sure.
And then we look at the overall body of work. Who did you play? What was your strength of schedule? What's the RPI? And then it becomes, do we know enough about these teams to say that data all checks out? So if a team looks like they're 20-0, but their commissioner says, yeah, but that's because they play in a lower division or because they haven't really played anybody, or so on and so forth.
Anyway.
But then in terms of, the conversation, the subjective piece, I know I look for a team that's complete, right? And that's difficult to achieve in college club volleyball.
Yes,
typically, you're going to get teams who've got some pretty athletic, high-flying outsides. Not every team has 2 middles, that can move and that can block. And teams that do, I think, have a huge advantage in college club. Obviously, a lot of these schools, they're not recruiting, so they're kind of at the mercy of who shows up on their campus. And, some schools tend to be easier to, they're kind of hotbeds, so they kind of easier to reload each year. They might lose some guys to graduation, but they're going to get new kids on campus. So there are perennial powers, but there are also teams that emerge every year, which is also really fun. So West Virginia, for example, is one of those teams. They're pretty well balanced. They don't have anybody super big, but they're very athletic. They play really strong. I'm looking at my Delaware guys over there.
Dude, they look good.
Delaware is very talented.
Yeah.
So number 44 over there, Ethan Hogan, is actually transferring to Pepperdine next year.
No way. To play Division I?
Yes.
Whoa.
I am quietly proud. Delaware has been a quiet factory now for a while. So for anybody
You're a Delaware alum.
I created the University of Delaware men's volleyball club
did.
way back in 2000, and we were not very good back then, but the program has steadily improved over the years, and I was able to go on and play a little bit of professional volleyball, and Mark Burek, who started at Delaware and then transferred to George Mason, ended up doing the whole Better at Beach thing, and he became a professional player. And now we got guys like Ethan. They had a kid last year transferred to Springfield. So, I am, not a lot of people know this, but Delaware volleyball has secretly become a factory for for high-level volleyball.
That's incredible. I mean, there are lots of examples similar to that of guys, more so guys than girls. I think on the women's level, it kind of goes the other way, where they'll start playing varsity somewhere, D2, 3 NAI, and then come back to the club level and be really good, which is awesome. But it's especially cool to see the sort of success stories of guys that start playing at the NCVF level and then end up going somewhere bigger, better, whatever, like a Pepperdine, for example. There were definitely guys when I played that transferred in grad school and played a little D1, or that went overseas and had good overseas careers. The VLA in particular is full of college club products.
Absolutely.
A bunch of absolute studs that play at the VLA level that could easily either did go overseas or could have. And it's just always really cool to see that. The nation at large, well, like those of us that are here, we know. We know how good this level is, how underrated it is. But the American volleyball community, I think, isn't quite aware of the level of talent that we have in this building right now.
Absolutely, that's so true. And it's worth reiterating in case you haven't already said it. But there's a lot of these guys here who did have opportunities and options to play varsity volleyball at some level, but for a variety of reasons, whether it be financial or personal or family or whatever, they choose to, mostly academic, they choose to go to these schools where it's the right fit for them. And fortunately, we've built this amazing opportunity for them to compete within leagues and play for a national championship, and it really is a beautiful thing. So there are some great players out there, and they definitely deserve the recognition. It's one of the reasons we're thrilled that you're here. I can tell you that I got a kid. I've been coaching a kid and mentoring him since he was, I don't know, maybe 11 years old, from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and he is now a senior in high school. He is one of the candidates to be on the AVCA High School All-America team, and he's a 6'5", outside, could play at any Division I program in the country, has been recruited by a bunch of them, and I think he's going to end up at Virginia Tech, again, for those academic and personal and family reasons and everything.
Virginia Tech is a great example. That team, when I was playing against them, Sean Callahan, who I just ran into earlier, still coaching them. That team was an absolute factory for pros.
No doubt.
There were so many pros that came out of Virginia Tech when I was playing. We always had great battles with them. We played them at Hoosier Illini, I swear, every year. That great example. And I went to Purdue. We had guys that were in similar situations that were getting recruited to different levels of options that they had to go all sorts of different places in the country, and chose Purdue one reason or another. Academics, location, size of the school, just whatever opportunities they wanted. And there's so many stories just like that create super good players. And I'm excited now to get sort of a feel now that I'm here, and because you've been watching a lot more ball than I have this year at the NCVF level. Now I can get here and look around and kind of start to figure that out. Who's good? Who has a chance? Who is going to emerge as a contender by the end of this day and have a chance to make a run through gold on Saturday? And that's just always really fun stuff to watch.
It is. So the goal for all these teams, obviously, is just win at least one match on day one, right? You can beat somebody in that top 48. You give your team a huge advantage as a step towards making gold. And so you got to win one match today, finish at least third in their pool. Then you have a crossover match with a 2 or a 3, and obviously if you win your pool, you're kind of sitting pretty. You just got to win one match tomorrow, and then you're in. So
skipping that do or die elimination challenge match is a pretty nice deal if you can win your pool on day one.
It is. It gets pretty cutthroat.
It does. I've been in both situations.
Yes, and there are great teams that just don't make it through every year. Teams that all season long, you swear that they're going to be one of the top 15 teams by the end of the season. And they just don't make it into that 16-team bracket in the gold bracket. But that's how good this tournament is,
So speaking of the tournament format, I've been talking about it a bit throughout the morning, and you've made another good point. You got to finish top 3 on day one. Then if you win that do or die challenge match tomorrow morning, you go to this power pool thing of 3 teams. You take top 2, you go to gold. That's the abbreviated version. What, in your opinion, are some of the keys to having success in this format? Because this is it, 3 days of volleyball in a row is more than any of these teams play all year long.
Right.
For one thing. So what do you think are a couple things that you've learned, that you've seen, that are indicative of a team that's going to be able to make a deep run in this thing? Yeah,
that's where, again, I think having a complete team really helps. In terms of the way your team is comprised physically, you got to be in shape. You got to have athletes at all the positions. You got to have a little bit of depth, because with 3 days straight of volleyball, there's a little bit of attrition on your body. You got to take care of your body. You got to make sure that you're not staying up late. And not all these teams have coaches, right? Many of them have coaches, but many of them do not. And so you're kind of relying on them to know what's best for themselves in terms of nutrition and rest. And so the teams that take care of their bodies, that rest up, that hydrate, that aren't staying up late, they're coming back the next day ready to rock and roll. There are teams that probably know what they should do and don't always do that when they're off the court. And so, sometimes they pay the price for that, right? Because, again, by the second and third day, whoever's on their A game is going to probably play their best. And so, that's something I would say is a key to success. The other thing, teams that have coaches definitely have an advantage because the coaches are reminding kids to make smart choices on and off the court, but they're also able to get away from the court and scout a little bit with upcoming opponents. So that creates a little bit of an advantage because if you know who you're going to play the next day or the next round of bracket play or something, you can do a little scouting report on them. That can definitely be doing
makes a big difference if you can get a little bit of data, most definitely. So I want to pick your brain about a couple teams in particular, just kind of give us a landscape of men's Division I. But before we do that, let me know if you agree with this, because I've had an assessment about some of the characteristics of a team that legitimately has a chance, just play style-wise. I want to see if this checks out to you. One is if you have a 6 rotation right side.
Yes.
If you have legitimately 6 rotations worth of right side attacking presence, that means 3 rotations of a D ball that you can chuck the ball back to and legitimately score. I think that is a huge difference maker. And the other one is the BIC. Yeah. The teams that actually run the BIC efficiently, that can do it in system and that can do it in transition. I think the teams that have those aspects to their offense end up being pretty darn dangerous in an event like this. Does that track to you?
Absolutely. I think those two offensive opportunities in particular are clutch because you get a lot of scrambles in this tournament for a variety of reasons, just because it's so competitive, but also, the limited court area that you're playing on, and, sometimes just the way the ball bounces from moment to moment. You need options outside of the front row. So you got that D ball, you got that BIC, you can set somebody in the back row. It definitely helps. So again, you got to have a balanced team. You got to have a team that's in sync with each other, and you got to have somebody to go to in those scrambles that can pull you out of it. And so those teams definitely are the teams that tend to win those tough points. And then, that's all it takes sometimes to win the match. And then there you are. You're headed to the gold bracket.
Sure. So let's talk through a little bit of the men's Division I. Give some people some background. Give me some background, because I need. You're going to help me do some of my research for me and figuring out who some of these teams are. I haven't gotten to see them fully yet. They're a court away from where we're sitting, but the #1 seed in this tournament this year is Mizzou.
Yes.
Then they're something of sort of the home team too, because we are in Missouri, and they're probably the closest school that has a team here to Kansas City. What did Mizzou do to impress you and the rest of the people that have helped you compile this ranking to give them the #1 overall seed coming into NCVF this year? Yeah,
I mean, Missouri, I think they look the part and they've played the part this season. They are big, they're physical, but they had a huge feather in their cap coming into the season because we knew that they were returning a lot of players from a team that came into the tournament ranked #1 last year. Last year they didn't end up making to the finals. They got beat by University of Illinois, another perennially strong team.
In the semis, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And the previous year, I think they got beat in the gold bracket by Arizona, and some of those kids that are here today were a part of that squad 2 years ago. And so they've got guys with experience. So again, they look the part and they play the part and they have the experience. And we knew all that about them when the season started. And then they've backed it up. They not only have dominated the Midwest Plains Volleyball Conference, but they also went to the Hoosier Illini tournament, beat some really good teams there.
One of the best tournaments in the country, and one of the few legit examples of sort of regional cross-pollination that we get in February every year. That tournament's, I'm sure, a big deal for you guys.
Yeah, and then if you're looking at the other teams that won their league championships outside of Missouri, I think Missouri was pretty much the consensus #1. And it's not always true that whoever wins the Midwest Plains is the #1 team in the country.
Very rare, actually.
Yeah, but we knew Missouri. We knew who they were all year long. But then you look at all the other teams that won their leagues. San Diego State, for example, won the Southern California League. Typically, the top 3 or 4 teams in Southern California are going to be gold bracket contenders.
Sure.
But San Diego State this year had their ups and downs. They finished the season 26-12, and so
Wow, they played 38 league matches? That's incredible.
That's another component of this whole ranking process that complicates it, is the West Coast teams typically play a lot more matches. They have a much larger sample size of results. That's because they don't have winter to deal with, really. So
must be nice.
They can start playing in January, whereas most of the other schools across the country in the Midwest and the East Coast, they don't play their first league events until sometimes mid-February. So it's a month extra of opportunities for them. So by the time it comes to ranking and seeding teams, you're trying to compare West Coast teams who might have played 30 or 40 matches with Midwest or East Coast teams that might have played 15 matches.
Right.
So, but yeah, San Diego State was 26-12, and it's hard to say what to do with that. How do you put a 12-loss team ahead of, let's say, of a team like Missouri who's 23-1, right? And it comes down to who you played, but also your total body of work. So we'll see, if teams like that end up squaring off at some point in the tournament, we'll find out, who should have been the #1 team, for example. Santa Clara, they're up there. They won Northern California. They had 4 losses on the season. I think they finished the season 20-4. They're a team that has got a couple of real special players, and at any moment, they could make the case that they should have been the #1 team in the country. Central Florida, who ended up winning my league, they're a strange case because they hadn't played a lot all season long. And early on, it looked like they weren't even the best team in our Southeast Division. We thought Florida was going to be that team, but UCF ended up winning that division. They ended up coming to our East Coast Championship and won that championship.
Who'd they beat?
They beat Penn State in our final. Now, our tournament was really interesting, so you got to qualify to get to our tournament, and you got to be one of the top teams in your region. So we've got the North, we've got the Central, we've got the South, and the Southeast. We had about 100 teams in our league from top to bottom. So
league is gigantic.
It is,
Whoa.
and it is divided between Division I and Division II. But either way, it's a gauntlet that you have to survive in order to get into our tournament. So it's a little bit like this when it comes to our league championship tournament. You got a lot of parity, and so whoever comes out on top, you know that they're pretty good. So UCF won our league, but they finished the season with a 14-1 record. So again, they came in here as the #2 seed in the country, but you're comparing their 23-1 team. Missouri's 23-1 team. UCF is a 14-1 team. Texas A&M is 17-1 team, and then the other teams all had multiple losses. Ohio State, who won NCVA, was 20-7 this year, and so how do you rank a 7-loss team against a 1-loss team, right?
Lower is the answer to that.
Well, you would think. But UCF came out here and they lost to a Midwest team. They lost to Loyola in their first match. It's just the way this tournament goes. Anything could happen.
That's the magic of it.
I will say this about my league. At our league championship, I mentioned this to you earlier, that I think perhaps the best team in the country, certainly one of the best teams in the country, is not here, unfortunately. That's Johns Hopkins University. They've kind of come out of nowhere. They've got some phenomenal players.
Dude, when you told me that last night, that Johns Hopkins, of all teams, not only has a men's club volleyball program, but is one of the best teams in the country, that blew my mind.
Yeah, well, those academically prestigious schools, nerd schools, if you will,
I'm a product of a nerd school,
yep,
some would
absolutely.
argue.
They tend to attract, some kids who are high achievers academically, but sometimes you get those kids from all over the country, and so they've got a bunch of kids from California and some from Canada who are on their campus right now. 2 brothers, the LeBlancs. Anybody listening can look them up. You'll find out they were the top-ranked beach duo in America, and so they both decided to go to Johns Hopkins because they want to be doctors. And so, those guys, for example, they just take that team to a new level. They got a couple of players, I think their top 3 players didn't come to our league championships because they were busy doing schoolwork. So had they been there, they very well may have won the East Coast. But regardless, they're not here at Nationals. They've never come to the National Championship Tournament. And if anybody from Johns Hopkins is listening, we're going to fix that. We're going to fix that. We're going to make sure that they're here next year.
We're going to fix that.
Because their whole team is coming back except for 1 player for next year. So they should be very strong again.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at so far what has come in from the men's D1 results. Every pool has played at least 1 match. Some, it was the second match results from the odd-numbered pools are starting to come in. You're doing well on Mizzou. They are 4-0 in sets.
Yep, that makes sense.
This pool in front of us actually has been pretty darn good because West Virginia beat Tennessee, but then Notre Dame beat them.
Yep.
So that's been pretty good. San Diego State is 2-0 in sets. But Indiana, the 2 seed in that pool, lost to LSU.
Yeah,
and I've never seen LSU, I think, ever at nationals. I didn't know that they were a D1A caliber team, so that's cool to see. Ohio State looks good. Texas A&M beat Utah Valley in 3. Ooh, more volleyballs. Let's see what else. Santa Clara looks good. Northern Arizona and Dayton, both of the top 2 seeds in that pool, both lost.
Yeah, my Alabama team is sneaky. They were.
Are they ECVL as well?
They joined the ECVA,
excuse me.
Last year. That was their first year. They have historically been an independent team, and Auburn's another similar case right down there in Alabama. We got these teams down there in the Southeast that hadn't been a part of any leagues, and so they play a lot of fellowship events, and they might have been pretty good, but they weren't really on our radar. So they would come to nationals, and we'd stick them in Division I AAA, sometimes one AA. But Auburn and Alabama joined our league. Alabama joined last year. Auburn joined this year, and we've seen that they're pretty good. And so Alabama had their first foray into D1 at nationals last year and represented pretty well. I think they made it to the silver bracket. But they're pretty good again. They've got a former varsity player, I think from Lewis or Loyola, who's one of their outsides.
I was wondering if those Alabama teams, Alabama and Auburn, happen to pull from Chicagoland. It wouldn't surprise me.
They do. They got some kids from Illinois. I think the president of Auburn's club is an Illinois guy. And some kids from Jersey and Pennsylvania. Again, schools like Alabama and Auburn, the prestige that those schools get just from their football teams.
Oh yeah, that pulls from everywhere.
It does. We know that a win in the NCAA basketball tournament or a bowl game win increases the applicant pool at a lot of these schools. Kids want to go there.
Too soon. I'm still a little sore from Purdue losing in the NCAA final.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. But you're absolutely right. That those do absolutely have ripple effects on your pool of applicants. And when you're a club volleyball team who's almost always unable to recruit anybody, then a greater pool of applicants is nothing but good for you because it's a greater chance of volleyball talent coming in.
That's right. They call that the Flutie effect. Doug Flutie threw a Hail Mary to help Boston College beat Miami in 1983, and then the next year Boston College's applications went through the roof. And that's been happening ever since then. So, wins in big-time sports that are especially nationally televised wins, they're good for the applicant pool. They're good for the university. The university can be more selective academically when they get more applicants, but also for club sports, like you said, it's a boom because
for sure
you've got more players on campus, and that usually yields a stronger club.
So tell me about a team that is not on the 1 seed line who you think can legit do some damage in the gold bracket. Maybe it's an ECVA team that you've seen. Maybe it's a team with high highs but has been a little bit of a roller coaster. What's a team that's not in the top 12 that you think is a bit of a dark horse?
That's a great question. I would say, Virginia Tech's in there. They definitely, they're not the top 5 team that they have always been this year.
Like
but
in my era.
Yes, but they're a solid 2 seed. On any moment they could take down a 1 and make it into gold. University of Virginia also right there.
Really, UVA? I never remember them being in the picture when I was playing.
Yeah, exactly. They've historically been a good 1AA team, but the past few years they've looked really strong in our league. And again, they're a good example of a team that's got great academics at the school, and so they attract kids from all over the place and end up, having a pretty good club team. Let me take a look here. Northridge, CSU Northridge is an interesting case because, they've performed well in Southern California, and again, typically, if you're a top 3 or 4 team in that league, you're a contender for the gold bracket, so they're definitely one to watch out for.
I'll get to this question in a second, but bringing up Northridge reminded me of to ask about a link, if you've noticed any, between teams that do have men's varsity programs, if that influences their ability at the club level or not.
Well, it can, but we try to mitigate for that by making sure that we have rules that are appropriate. So,
right.
One of the rules that the NCVF has is no team can have more than 2 former varsity players, right? So Northridge has a varsity program. Maybe there are 2 guys who are on the club team that played for that varsity program, and it might give them a slight advantage over schools that don't have a varsity program. But there's enough parity. The teams that they're playing against are big enough schools. They've got pools of players on their campus where it ends up coming out in the wash eventually. But if we were to change that limit, let's say raise the threshold to 3 or 4 former varsity players, I think it would create a huge advantage for the schools that have varsity programs.
Which I know it's been talked about in the past. I personally agree definitely with keeping it at 2. Because, we got UC Santa Barbara, for example, we just saw UCLA, Northridge. I don't know if Long Beach State has ever really been relevant on the club level. I know I played them 1 year and they weren't particularly good, but then you have Ohio State and Penn State, like those teams from a little further east that have varsity programs. Loyola Chicago, who's playing in front of us, is a good example. So I'm always just curious to see, and sometimes it goes year in, year out, depending on if you happen to get 1 or 2 guys that come down from the varsity programs.
Yeah, and the other thing there is, they don't have to actually be former varsity players
at that
to
school
make it an advantage.
True.
Just the fact that school has a varsity program is going to attract the top players, typically from that state and from that region. So Penn State's a great example. They're always one of the top teams in the country, always one of the top teams in the East Coast for sure.
Yeah, kids that want to go to Penn State, perhaps good players try and walk on to the varsity team or whatever, and then they fall back to playing club for one reason or another. That's a great example. Exactly.
So, and Pennsylvania, a state where there's a ton of boys volleyball at the high school level, so they're going to reload every year, right? And that's a little bit different than Purdue, for example, where Purdue doesn't have a varsity program. So if you're going to Purdue, you're not going there thinking you're going to play varsity volleyball, right? You're going there for the academics. You're going there because it's the right fit for you. But there might only be 30 or 40 guys who are, high-level, solid volleyball players that are trying out for your club. Maybe 50 on a good year. But at places like Penn State, you've got probably 100 kids that are trying out. So it's just easier to reload.
Yep, definitely. All right, let's see. What do we got going on right now? We have Loyola versus Colorado State. I liked Colorado State earlier. They beat UCLA, I think, 15-13 in the third. It was a good match. I wonder how your Delaware guys did. I can't see the score over there. We'll have to go and...
I think they lost to UCSB. I could be wrong.
I know they lost the first, so I'm not sure if they made that comeback or not.
No,
oh, yeah, UC San Diego I'm seeing warming up over there. Man, there's so many different teams. I'm so excited just to watch everyone and get data and start to figure this sort of stuff out.
Well, the California schools, they're the hardest to rank.
Oh, yeah.
They are our problem children. It's a good problem, but like I said, they play so much because they start earlier and they play each other a lot. Not only in league play, but there are also large ranking tournaments out there. So
they still have that one big Vegas tournament in March.
They've got Vegas. Okay. They've got they've got another one called the West Region Challenge that ECVA runs. That seems to attract a pretty good turnout. They got Far Westerns up at Davis, and so teams don't have to leave the state of California, and they're going to find great competition, and they can do that a lot. And so, it's pretty common for those teams to finish the season with a lot more wins and a lot more losses than teams from the rest of the country, and it just makes them so hard to rank. They're notoriously hard to rank against each other,
right?
Because they'll beat up on each other all year long, and then they're even harder to rank against teams from the rest of the country. So, just getting the California teams in the right order throughout the season
that's hard to do.
It's a task.
But there's a lot of movement. All right, I have 2 more questions for you, Neiad, before we get you out of here and I get back to showing some volleyball to the people. One is, tell me your outlook on Wisconsin, because they're the reigning national champs.
Yep.
I think they're, 12th overall?
Yeah, they seem to have come on strong after faltering, early to midway through the season. They suffered a bunch of losses, and whether it's because they lost key players from last year, I think they did lose 1 or 2 of their key guys from last year. But they suffered a few losses earlier on in the season. Obviously didn't win the Big Ten, but they did perform well down the stretch.
Did Ohio State win the Big Ten?
Ohio State did win the Big Ten. Yeah, they beat Illinois, I believe, in the finals. And Wisconsin made it to the semis. And so, again, if you're in the semis of NCVA, that's a pretty good case that you're one of the top programs in the country. So Wisconsin is just, to be fair to them, like last year, they kind of came out of nowhere to win the national title.
They did.
They didn't win the NCVA last year.
That's right.
And they ended up coming here and winning it. So they very well may do the same again this year, right? But they were on the bubble of are they really a 1 seed or should they be a 2 seed? And we needed somebody to put at 12. To be honest with you, we were very certain in our top 11 that they all deserve to be 1 seeds, and we're like, where's the next best team that deserves to be a 1? and evaluating everybody's records and their strength of schedule and how they finish at the league championships, we decided to give the nod to Wisconsin. And we think that's appropriate. They did win it all last year, and they seemingly kind of fixed whatever they were dealing with earlier on in the season. And so we'll see how it plays out.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, they completely dominated Chico State in their first game.
Okay,
25-10, 25-20.
Yeah.
So that's pretty convincing. My last question is about my alma mater. Is Purdue in D1 AA this year, is that a case that they weren't good enough, or did they not register early enough to get into D1A? Because I cannot remember the last time that Purdue did not play in the top division.
Well, I don't want to use the words you just used, but I'll say it was not a registration issue. They registered on time, but Purdue finished with a 6-11 record. And, again, they're playing in the MIVA. It's a tough league. Winning record in the MIVA says a lot. If you're 500 in the MIVA, that's still a pretty good sign. But when you're 5 matches below 500, it was pretty tough. And the MIVA has so many teams that are candidates for D1 that you can't get everybody in. Dan Kitchell, who does ranking recommendations on behalf of the MIVA.
The legend himself.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
He and I, joke around a little bit because between our 2 leagues, we could probably populate the top 48. We have so many teams.
100%. Yeah, I'm sure that is true. And like you said earlier, it used to be like a top 36, 38, 40 in D1, and then you just had to kind of fill the rest. Not the case anymore.
It's not. So there's a lot of parity and a lot of teams kind of creating a logjam trying to get into D1. So Purdue is on that list. Actually, we identified 16 teams that we thought were on the bubble, and we went through them one by one. Each round, we had a conversation, we looked at the results, and we decided, all right, they definitely belong in, or they definitely should drop down to 1AA. And we did multiple rounds of that until we whittled it down to who we thought were the top 48. And then, inevitably we come here, we watch it all play out, and then, we see how we've done.
Yeah. Hindsight's 20/20. It always is.
It is, and I will say that I think the bottom 12 teams in Division I and the top 12 teams in 1AA are typically pretty interchangeable. So like Loyola Chicago, great example. We stuck them in 1AA last year.
They won, didn't they?
They won it all.
Yeah.
And now here they are in D1, and they're proving that they belong. So, that's just one of many examples where you see just there's so many teams that could be in that top 48. Who knows? Maybe in the future we'll expand it to the 64-team bracket or something.
Well, Neiad, man, thank you so much for coming on and telling us all this data, because if the people listening to you the way you're talking about this aren't fascinated by all that actually goes into this tournament, I don't know what they're all listening to. I love hearing all this stuff and all the very legitimate and analytical and high-level decision-making that goes into running a tournament like this. And maybe we'll get you on tomorrow afternoon and see how your seeding's doing based on how it goes today.
Yeah, we'll check in, only if it's going well.
If it's not,
don't find me. Hey, thank you for your support of College Club Volleyball. For anybody watching, listening, pay attention, show some love to College Club Volleyball. It's way cooler, way better than you think, and Rob's here to showcase that, so we very much appreciate it.
Well said. Thank you, buddy.
All right.
Have a great tournament. I can't wait to be back. We're going to have some fun this week.
Awesome.
Thanks, man.
Thanks.